Hello, Megan. I am doing a response. Let's see if I can keep it under 3 minutes here. Um, Watching that video about, of course, pornography in the age of AI, with that gentleman. I forget his name right now. No offense to him. It's just preoccupied with what I'm looking at. And he and I, we share a bit of uh, family background, and then in that I have two older sisters, and I think that he has older female siblings. Now, what I wanted to talk about here was that, in reference to, again, the great Andrew Huberman. He's only a neuroscientist and stuff. Shit. You think people would stop listening to talking heads and start listening to actual uh, experts on this subject matter? When it comes down to it, it is the biology that defines and is a predictor of behavior more than society or something systemic or structural. And again, Megan, you're not stupid. I know what it says on your Wikipedia page, and where you went to school and what you studied and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to insult you. Um, but I will present you new information. So I was looking for the diagram or the pictogram that was actually it pops up on 4chan every once in a while, and I haven't gone to 4chan. I haven't perused 4chan in a couple of years, notably because of certain legislation here in Canada. So without what's it, without a proxy or a VPN, it's a bit risky to even go there. But what the pictogram was showing was the declining. It was in correlation to the declining rate of fertility amongst young people, and having to do with the shrinking penis size, and basically the feminization of men, and so that they were decreasing in height, in bone density, and their hip ratios were increasing, and also the tendency to gain weight, um, in like belly and hip areas, which is more commonly associated with women. And what this why I was referencing Andrew Huberman is because he said in his one of his more recent interviews of one of his cohorts, was that we are hardwired to instantly assess another human being as we approach them, and to put them into two categories, either male or female. And this is in contradiction to the queer elitist view of gender and sexuality, in that they believe that it is a choice, but more or less it comes down to uh, genetics, hereditary pre-existing conditions. So that means either endocrine problems and thyroid conditions, or lymphatic conditions. in which there is either a lacking of hormonal production or a overproduction depending on certain genetic markers. And this also has a huge influence upon later fertility in say life in their lives, individual lives, because of exposure to testosterone neonatally, um, and then a secondary burst, of course, within puberty. And this has to, again, if I mention or I dare say, the puberty blockers, which more or less are testosterone blockers being used in children to alter their presentation, but not their biology of their gender, sorry, their sex and their gender presentation. So I'm looking at this, and more or less what it's saying here is that hip size doesn't have as much of an influence over fertility as much as being fat does. And of course, it's critical that a woman's hips naturally are large enough in the gap. Of course, I'm talking about the pelvic floor here, to, well, birth a child. And this is one of the obsessions over, say, like thigh gap and so on and so forth. And what more or less, if you read between the lines of this, it's basically saying, or it's indicating, because look at the publishing date here, on 2025 February 27th. So this is recent. This is as recent as it gets when it comes to published papers. And again, not only are hormones produced within the fat, but other environmental influences or synthetic signals that end up replacing naturally occurring chemical markers, if that's what I'm going to say, that communicate between the brain, the pituitary glands, again, and other stuff, as to if and when to produce testosterone, or if and when to produce progesterone. So what I'm indicating here is that, women are not stupid. Women are smart, right? And the smart ones are working out. It's not something that's negotiable. And they're not just working out to improve their own lives or their own attractiveness, but also to have less problems later in life, but also to increase their chances of having a fruitful and healthy pregnancy. Because a person, and again, this is not to be critical of women, but a fit woman is attractive because she will be more likely to survive childbirth, if not the emergency scenario of a cesarean section. Now, I've had my opinions of cesareans before, and I've thought, in my amateur opinion, that they've been overused or overemployed, because the doctors are just so quick to resort to it, or they need practice or something along those lines, and they justify it by using their patience as a means of practice. So, of course, the popularity IVF has to do with the fact, well, we overuse and overemploy birth control, hormonal birth control, or the Plan B pills, and so on and so forth. And this is something I've been vocal about before. Is in speaking out against is the abuse or misuse of birth control, or prescribing it to teenage girls, and so on and so forth, or even prepubescent girls, as a means of blocking puberty. Even, well, if your body's producing progesterone, it's not producing estrogen. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Okay, so yeah, more stuff about the indicators or predictors of waist to hip ratios. And again, we're not just hardwired to perceive and react to other humans as male or female, but also we are hardwired to pick up on the pheromonal signals as to whether or not a person is fertile. And of course, I'm not mansplaining here, but a woman's health and fertility, or rather, not her health, her attractiveness, has to do with her fertility cycle, and that changes monthly, naturally. So then there's other articles from Psychology Today. Here's NIH, Association Waist to Hip Ratio. So on and so forth. So I think that if you haven't covered this one is more recent as well, 2024, May 2nd, that it would be something good to cover. Play ball. Let's take it home.